what they actually want me to do is they want me to take this Healing the Identity Body Invocation. You're welcome to read along with it if you feel like it, or you can just listen. I'm not going to read the verses. I'm just going to read in between because there's some teachings in there that are important. No, we're not. No, we don't need to portray it on the screen. It doesn't matter. People can either listen or they can read if you prefer. But what I'll do is I'll read the numbered paragraphs, and then I'll see what comments come up as a result of it. It's just that, you know, when you're giving an invocation, you're giving it so fast, you really don't have time to focus on. And since this is a new one that none of us really know very well, I thought I would, they want me to do this so that we get more of these ideas of the identity. So I accept that I'm more than the identity I have taken on here on earth, both in this and previous lifetimes. Guess that's pretty explanatory, or self-explanatory in the sense that, well, actually, maybe it isn't. I mean, in the sense that we, as Raphael said, we have to take on a certain identity to integrate with the identity body. And if we are going to be an embodiment in a certain culture, a certain time, I assume that part of what we take on is, you know, what allows us to even, you know, embody in that time and function in that time. But then, of course, we have different lifetimes where we live in different environments. So we can, over time, pick up a lot of a certain sense of identity of how you're supposed to be here on Earth as a human being. And like he also said, Raphael, nothing sticks to the sunbeam. Nothing sticks to the conscious you. So it's okay that we have this, but, well, some things we need to let go of, I think. We need to weed out. But other things we just need to say, okay, it doesn't matter, but I'm not attached to it. I'm not defined by it. So I accept I'm more than a mortal human being. I'm an immortal spiritual being. And in a sense, we have all accepted that we are spiritual beings. But I think there are levels of acceptance of that, that we can always benefit from once in a while, just stepping back and realizing that, you know, I'm not mortal. You know, my separate selves are mortal, but the conscious you is immortal. And in a sense, you could say that's a contradiction, because what happens when we ascend, we merge back with the I Am Presence. But I think that shift is not a loss of identity. It's not that the conscious you experiences this, that I'm going to die. I think it's, we just rise to a higher sense of self that the I Am Presence is. I accept that I'm pure awareness and that the conscious you cannot be harmed or changed by anything in this world. Well, that's what he covered. I realized that pure awareness might have different meanings to different people. And I have realized also lately that I used to think, when I first heard the concept of the conscious you, I used to think it meant that the conscious you really doesn't have any personality or individuality. That it's just like there's no structure there. But I realized that that isn't really the case either, because the conscious you is an extension of the I Am Presence. So it has the individuality of the I Am Presence, which is an individual being. So again, it's like, you know, and understand the pure awareness comes from the fact that when you step outside of the outer personality and have a mystical experience, you can experience this. You are just aware, but there's no contents of your consciousness. There's just awareness, pure awareness, that is not the outer perception filters we normally see through. But I'm beginning to realize that there is actually still something. It may not be in the conscious you, because I've been thinking about where in the conscious you would it be, but it is in the I am presence. And so we have a certain connection to I am presence. And of course, part of rising on the spiritual path is just becoming more aware of that. We've also talked about we become an open door. So that means that the individuality of the I am presence can shine through it. And so I think we also have to realize that it's not a matter of getting rid of all individuality. I actually thought that in the beginning when I gave the concept of the conscious you. But it is a matter of gradually getting rid of the outer individuality, so we are not identified with it. And as I said, there can still be some traces of the outer personality that really don't matter, that we just get rid of in the end. But we become more aware of the individuality of the I am presence, that we are individual beings. I remember in the Summit Lighthouse, they had the chart of where there's a lower figure, and then way up there is the I am presence. And it was always portrayed that the I am presence is like this godlike figure. It's already perfect. And I think it was a very important teaching that the masters have said not so long ago, that the I am presence is not an ascended being. No, it's out of ascended beings, but it isn't ascended. That's why it's sent the conscious you to experience what you can experience in an undescended sphere. And so that means the conscious you is still learning and growing. And that means it can change over time, and it's changing as we are experiencing. And as we are resolving things in our consciousness, the I am presence is also changing from that. So it's an interactive process, which I didn't understand for a long time. I didn't grasp that. I accept that I'm more than a powerless human being. I'm a co-creator with God, and with God all things are possible. So this is what he talked about, Raphael, also, that we are an extension not just of the I am presence, but of the ascended masters who created the I am presence, and they are extensions of other ascended masters at higher levels, reaching all the way to the creator. So when we realize that, the conditions we face on earth, let's say it's healing something, it's not something we can do with our own power, with the power of the outer mind, but with the power of the entire hierarchy and lineage that we are out of. When we connect to that power and let that power flow through us, then it really is possible to change many conditions on earth. I accept that I'm more than a limited self that thinks it cannot do many things on earth. I accept that I'm more than my subconscious selves that automatically react to things on earth. Instead, I can consciously choose my reaction. I can choose not to react. I have the right to not react. And so this is, again, a subconscious self is created in order to react to certain situations and deal with certain situations. And becoming conscious of the subconscious selves means that we now, instead of automatically subconsciously going into reacting, we can be conscious of a situation and choose not to react the way we normally do. Because this is, again, I have, in the last year or so, I have looked at a lot of videos on YouTube about the non-duality, because non-duality is like a big trend out there. And I can see there's a lot of spiritual people that have become more or less trapped in this. And it's like they have this idea that you are, I don't even know how to say it, because it's like it's almost like they have the idea that we are only a separate self, and there's nothing else to us than the separate self. And we need to overcome the sense of self. Yeah, because they don't have the concept of the conscious you or the I am presence. It's like they think there's only the separate self, and then there's Brahman or infinite awareness. So it's like when the separate self awakens from the illusion that it exists and that it's real, then you despair. There's nothing there. It's like, what's the purpose of existence then?
Yeah.
The reason why you exist is that you're supposed to come to realize that you don't exist, and then you stop existing.
Yeah. Ridiculous. But...
Great if that motivates somebody, but it doesn't motivate me. So, but it's also that it's like, for them, it's like nothing in life has any purpose or meaning. No activity on earth has any meaning. Because, as it says here, I am more than a limited self that thinks it cannot do many things on earth. It's like they haven't realized that you are more. So you are actually here because we are created as co-creators. So we are here to be co-creators. We are not here to just be passive and submit like most people do, submit to whatever is in our culture. We're here to change things, but not as a separate self, but by connecting to the lineage and being the open door for the I am presence and the masters. Yeah, but we're not changing. We can't change things with the outer. It's actually by being, as you said, the sunbeam and just shining the light that we change things, because people can see there's an alternative to the darkness. So in a sense, the non-dualists are saying, yeah, there's an alternative to the darkness. It's nothing, nothingness. I accept that I'm more than a separate self. I'm a connected self, and I can experience my connection to my own presence, to you, Mother Mary, and to all ascended masters, reaching all the way to our creator. That's what we talked about. You can come to experience that you are out of that lineage. And of course, everything on earth will want us to deny that we are connected to something higher. Obviously the fallen beings, but even many people, because they think they're only human beings. They think they are powerless, and there are certain things we can't change on earth. And they want us to do the same, because if we demonstrate that you can be more, then they will be forced to think maybe they could be more, and they don't want that. So everybody wants us to just not be an open door for anything higher. I accept that I'm not alone in this dense world. I am the conscious you, which can never be separated from the Christ mind, because without it was not any being made that was made. So that's an important concept. And I don't think I fully realized that until the Easter webinar. I think it was the Easter webinar. Maybe it was Korea. Anyway, Jesus said, you are already the Christ consciousness, because nothing was made without the Christ consciousness. Everything is made out of it. It's like saying, your body is separated from the atoms. There's no atoms in my body. No. But you could never be separated from atoms, because everything in the physical world is made out of atoms. So, but that's what we are thinking. So we are actually already in the Christ mind. And this I think is something that goes way back in spiritual movements, even thousands of years back, of becoming something you are not now. Instead of, as we talked about, realizing what you already are, returning to wholeness. So we are created out of the Christ mind, and when we were created, we were whole. And it's just a matter of returning to that state of wholeness. And this is kind of I sense going to be a theme for this conference. I accept that as the conscious you, I'm able to step outside my entire sense of identity and experience myself as pure or neutral awareness. I'm willing to have that experience. Is there anybody here who doesn't know what that means, who has never had that experience? You know, it's like if you haven't experienced it, it's all an intellectual exercise. But when you experience that there's something outside your outer mind that you are, and it's more real than what you experience through the outer senses, that's a fundamental shift, and it's a really important shift. I don't know how you can communicate to somebody who hasn't experienced it, but I have over time met people that when they realized what it was, that, oh yeah, but I did experience that. So I think many people have had the experience. They don't know exactly what it means. Well, I think it really means that you're stepping outside the outer mind. So we have the physical, mental, emotional, mental, identity bodies. And when the conscious you can step outside of all four of them. And so you realize you are not the outer personality. And you're just experiencing awareness, being aware. And I remember in transcendental meditation, you know, the reason why it's called transcendental is that you're supposed to, the meditation gives you a transcendental experience where you're transcending your normal awareness, where there's contents in consciousness, and you're experiencing consciousness in its pure state. And it's also described in many mystical experiences in various ways that your mind can be still, you can be a silent witness that's just seeing it. So for me, the important part of it is that you realize that you are not the outer personality. And therefore, you can look at the outer personality and identify the separate selves, and you can let them die because you are not going to die when they do. That's a really good point, because you also see among spiritual people that there is this tendency to create this idea of this, you know, out of this world, superior, absolute experience, bliss, nirvana, enlightenment, you know, and you said it yourself, your idea of what pure awareness is. You know, pure awareness is beyond any idea that the outer mind can come up with. And that's why, in a sense, it's even dangerous to put a name on it. Pure awareness, neutral awareness. But how can you talk about something without using words? So that's why, you know, as the master said, the words are just pointers. But I agree with you that it's much more important to be aware that you have this, you know, that's not so far-flung. It's actually a natural experience to have. Because many people are chasing these peak experiences, and that's not what it's about. You will actually find many Buddhists who are talking about this, that it's almost normal, or it's not so special. Even some of the non-dual teachers actually talk about this. You know, it's not an out of this world special experience, because it's really like the backdrop. In a sense, it's like you're sitting in a movie theater and the film runs out and there's just a white screen. But if you have never seen the white screen, you think there has to be a movie running in your head all the time. So it's that just a sort of stillness. There isn't all this going on. So the thinking mind, when it hears the concept of bliss or nirvana or what, it creates a concept of it. And if it hears that this is supposed to be the ultimate state of consciousness, then, it blows it up to be out of this world. And you see many people who talk about, oh, this master is enlightened and that master is enlightened. And they think they're in this superior state of consciousness all the time. But there are actually many Buddhists who say that's not the case. You have glimpses of it, and then you could go back into everyday awareness because you still have to function. After awareness, the laundry. And so there's actually a Buddhist text that talks about samsara and nirvana is actually the same thing. They are created by the mind as two opposites. Because samsara is suffering, and the mind doesn't recognize that it has created the suffering. So it wants to get out of suffering. So it imagines there's this wonderful state outside of suffering. But it's still just the mind that has created it. But see, the Buddha was talking about escaping suffering and entering a higher state of consciousness. So it again is, once you start talking in words, you're trapped in using words, and people, the outer mind will always think of it dualistically. So it will always create two dualistic extremes. That's what I was trying to say in one of my later videos about the non-dualist. It's non-duality can become a dualistic concept. And then you're just trapped in it, in imagining what it is. You're still using the dualistic mind. So he's asking whether the idea of this superior experience is a hindrance. And it very easily can be. And that's also what some of the Buddhist teachers are saying, that because if you think about it, the outer mind is what creates the suffering, because it's constantly projecting an image, a mental image of what the world should be, and as Raphael said, what should happen, what shouldn't happen. So if you have this should and shouldn't, you're constantly projecting, and the world is stubbornly refusing to live up to your projections, so you suffer. Now you get the idea that you don't want to suffer anymore, you want to get out of suffering. So now you hear about the superior state of consciousness. But what the outer mind does, it creates a concept of what that is like. So you're now projecting, you're supposed to attain this concept, this idea in the mind. But you're doing the same thing that brought you into suffering. You are projecting a mental image with the mind. Whereas what you're talking about, the backdrop, is when you are experiencing that your mind falls still and you're not projecting. And the mind can only see this in terms of dualistic polarities and extremes. So the more intense people's suffering is, the deeper they've gone into separation, the more they're going to create this completely out of this world mental image of bliss or enlightenment, or how wonderful it is. And of course, the more elaborate the image is, the harder it is to attain. But it's not even that. Any image you have, you're pushing the experience away from you, because the experience is when the mind falls still and stops projecting. So as long as you're projecting that you are supposed to experience this wonderful state, you're pushing it. You're like this donkey that's pulling a cart, and there's a man sitting with this long stick holding a carrot in front of the nose, and the donkey is running to try and catch up to the carrot. So I think that's, especially in Zen Buddhism, that's what they're talking about. That's why they have the koans. A koan is designed to neutralize or completely confuse the linear mind, the thinking mind. So you snap out of it, yeah?
Saying kill the Buddha.
Yeah. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him.
Yeah. First time when I read this, I would.
Yeah, me too. Me too. But the idea of this is that it's just like we talked about. We are already the Christ consciousness. So it's a matter of coming to realize and accept that I am the Christ consciousness. And therefore, if you identify that somebody else is the Christ, like Jesus, and you can't be, because he was the only Son of God, this is preventing you from seeing the Christ or the Buddha in yourself. So that's why this Zen Buddhist said, if you identify somebody else to think he's the Buddha and he's the only one, you better kill that one, because otherwise you'll never be free. So what you really have to do is kill the mental image in your mind. And so you can see that Christianity, since the creation of the Catholic Church, where Jesus is made the only Son of God, it's totally trapped in this. And it is totally preventing the fulfillment of Jesus' mission, where he wanted everybody to discover the kingdom of God within themselves. It's a total opposition, total perversion. Yeah. So you're saying that some people have this goal of reaching this superior state, but it's more important to have the healing of the separate self you're dealing with right now. Oh, I see. Yeah, but that's an important point. I mean, what is the purpose of a spiritual experience? Many people have made it a goal in itself. But the goal is, as you said, to have a frame of reference. And that's what I'm saying. When the conscious you experiences that it's more than the outer self, then you have a frame of reference for evaluating a particular separate self, and you can say, okay, I can let this go. Because and I think back on all the years where, before I had the concept of the separate or subconscious selves, there was always talk about the ego. But the ego was just like this big mystical thing there, and very hard to get a handle on what exactly is the ego. And there's a tendency for people to think about it as all or nothing. You can see these people that think they have experienced ego death. They had this dramatic experience, now they have no ego anymore. And then just after they've said that, they go and behave in a way that's clearly ego. So there's this tendency to think this, and that's why I think it's very important to realize that, first of all, we can break the ego down into these smaller cells. But also because the ego, if we think that it's all or nothing with the ego, then the ego will feel extremely threatened, because the ego does not want to die. And so that's why, when you realize, when you have that frame of reference, and when you see that it's just one self, specific self, it becomes easier to let it die, because you're not dying. But even the ego knows it's not dying when you let one self go. So there's not as much, you see what I'm saying? It's not as much resistance from the ego. And that's why you can actually use that in a sense, to say, we gotta let this self die, and then, the ego thinks, then he'll leave me alone. But of course, we won't. Yeah, so she's saying that many people, when they find the spiritual path, is because they have some specific condition they want to heal. And that's been my observation too with many people. I don't know if you agree with that. Yeah, but I think it's very true that many people, when we first find a spiritual path, it's not that we are necessarily looking to reach this ultimate state of consciousness. We just want to relief from some particular kind of suffering. And that's, ties in, that's what the Buddha basically did 2,500 years ago. He addressed that, and he said, okay, he didn't try to give the ultimate spiritual teaching 25 years ago, even though many Buddhists think so. He was saying, for people who are suffering and they can't stand it, what can we give them that can give them some relief? And then later they can grasp a higher goal. It's kind of what the masters, through me, have called the bait and switch technique. Where you look at what are people's needs, and you offer them relief from that, and then you hope that as they get that relief, they will see that there could actually be a higher purpose and a higher goal for spiritual growth than just escaping suffering. Okay, so let me just see here. So it's talking about, I am more than the subconscious selves think I am, and I can break free from my worldly sense of identity. I cannot die by letting any self in my identity body die. And this is what the ego it doesn't want to die. It wants to survive. So it will resist you letting anything die. And you can only really do it and you realize that you are more than your sense of identity. You think about today, what you actually see in the world is that people are becoming more and more attached to their sense of identity. You see it in the political scene in the US, for example. Are you a Republican or Democrat? Are you this or that? But you also see the whole debate about sexual identity. Is there more than two sexes? Your sexual orientation. Many people are becoming more and more identified with it, and they take it more and more towards the extreme. And the purpose is that they live it out to the extreme so they can come to see at some point that they are more than this. That it isn't who they are, and that basically you can say, if you take the reality simulator analogy, that we're allowed to have any experience that we are a certain type of being, a certain sense of identity. We're allowed to outlive that for as long as we want. But it's just that as the planet is being raised, people become more and more extreme in order to maintain a certain sense of identity. And that's why hopefully the time is shortened to the point where they can't do it anymore. They have had enough of it. And then they realize that I'm more than this. And so by becoming conscious of this, that I am not in my identity body, I am not a particular nationality, I am not a child of my parents, the way I was brought up, the way my parents, parents without realizing it, they are instilling in you a certain sense of identity. You are my child as I see myself. And we grow up with this. And so there comes a point where you have to realize, no, I'm actually not. I'm an independent human being. I had many lifetimes before I was embodied as your child. And, so we can let go of that. It doesn't mean we can't have a relationship with our parents, but it means that we're not identifying ourselves based on that, what we were brought up to. And I guess I don't think we need to go through the whole invocation, but what the masters just wanted us to become aware of or discuss is just simply this, that in order to achieve healing, we have to, they are having us start with the identity part. You might think we should have started with the physical, but they are deliberately having us start with the identity body. And in order to achieve healing, we have to come to realize that we are more than any of the contents in our identity body. Because whatever conditions we want healing from, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, the only way to really have healing is to realize we are more than this condition. Because let's say that, I don't know if I can come up with a direct example. Let's just say that your family has a certain illness that have been inherited for many generations. So you have been brought up in this environment where you think that because of who you are, your genes, your upbringing, your family history, you're prone to get heart disease or whatever, high blood pressure or whatever it is. And if you are to be healed of that condition, you have to let that sense of identity die. Because as long as you maintain it, you are projecting this on your physical body. And your physical cells will take on the condition. Because in a sense, you could say, which I'm sure they will talk about, that when you take the analogy of the reality simulator, what is your physical body? What is our physical bodies? It's just our personal reality simulator. And the reality simulator, it works so that whatever we are projecting into the simulator that we want to experience, it will give us back to us. So if we are projecting from the identity body through the mental, through the emotional, a certain condition on our physical bodies, our physical cells will say, okay, that's what he wants to experience. That's what we have to outpicture. We would rather not. We'd rather be healthy, but if that's the experience he wants to have. So how are we going to be healed unless we even start at the identity level and say, do I have some sense of identity that I'm limited, that I'm flawed, that my physical body is flawed because I have this history that I can't overcome? I have, what have we been brought up with? I mean, genes, I remember being told in school that basically everything about me was a product of my DNA. My personality, whether I liked this or that, it was all in my DNA. And that was how it was portrayed at that time. I assume it still is. And we have to come to realize that's just not the case. So it's actually, I remember many of you probably heard me say this before, that I read this textbook that says that the DNA only tells your cells how to produce proteins. The cells are made out of proteins, our whole bodies are made out of proteins. It's obviously an important part of it. But you tell me, how is the instructions for how to build proteins in the cells, how is that going to define my personality? So obviously, there has to be more to it, and that's what the Master has given us, that there is the emotional, mental, and identity bodies that are projecting onto the physical cells. And they are outpicturing what is projected on them. And that's why we have to, in order to be healed of whatever condition, we have to start shifting, even shifting our sense of identity. So I think that was basically what they wanted us to go through that. So we'll have a dictation now by Mother Mary, and I think you should have your notepads ready. I am the Ascended Master, Mother Mary. I would like you for a moment to think about how you look at me as an Ascended Master, as the representative of the Divine Mother for Earth. What images, concepts, ideas do you have in your minds? Especially, how do you look at me compared to yourself? You see, if you look at the image you have of me, it will tell you something about the image you have of yourself. Your identity, your sense of self. And many of you will recognize that because you recognize the existence of Ascended Masters, you also recognize or see that we are above and beyond you. We are superior to you because we are ascended. We are in the spiritual realm. But you are not ascended. You are still in embodiment. So you are in a lower state of consciousness than I am. But now, what does this mean? It means that you see a gap between yourself and I. Why are you sitting here listening to a human being who is acting as a messenger, where I, an ascended master, can speak through him and give a dictation? Because you are not sure that you can hear me directly in your own mind and heart. Why else would you need to listen to an external voice if you could hear me directly in your heart? And why are you not sure that you can hear me directly? Because you see a gap between you and I. I am in a higher state of consciousness. You are in a lower state of consciousness. You are not sure you can cross the distance. Now, don't worry, my beloved. I'm not going to tell you that you need to snap your fingers and overcome this illusion. What you are seeing is true, is correct, is the case from the perspective that you are looking from when you are in your outer awareness. When you are in your outer awareness, when the conscious you is inside the contents of your identity, mental, emotional, physical bodies, there is a gap between you and I, because my consciousness does vibrate at a higher level and yours at a lower level, because yours is attuned to the radio station of the material world with its 4 levels. And therefore, you cannot hear me directly within that outer mind. But what is the magic, we might say, of the teachings we have given about the conscious you? It is that the conscious you can step outside of that outer personality. And what have we said? Everything is created out of the Christ consciousness. That means what? That means that the great connector is the Christ consciousness. What allows the messenger to take a message from an ascended master? The Christ consciousness. What allows the conscious you of yourself to step outside the outer mind? The Christ consciousness. What is it that happens when the conscious you steps outside of the outer mind? You experience the Christ consciousness, whatever you call it. You experience the connecting link. So, I am not in time and space. Your follower bodies are in time and space. When the conscious you looks at me through the filter of the follower bodies, you cannot hear me. But when the conscious you steps outside of that filter, you are beyond time and space, as I am beyond time and space. Naturally, we can connect. Of course, we can connect. What can prevent us from connecting when the conscious you is not inside of and identified with the 4 lower bodies? No thing can prevent us. There is no thing in your 4 lower bodies or in the 4 levels of the material universe that can prevent us from connecting. And I say no thing, because everything in the 4 levels of the material world is a thing, or at least a concept of a thing. And of course, there is also nothing, which would be the normal expression. Nothing can prevent our connection. But that is not what I want to convey, because how can nothing prevent anything? Nothing is nothing. So it's not nothing that's preventing us from connecting, it's the thing you identify with. So I know it can always be difficult to follow a dictation. Your body might get sleepy, but I'm asking you to be awake now. Close your eyes, focus your attention on your heart, the center of your chest, your heart chakra. And now follow this exercise. Would you identify yourself as your little toe on your right foot? Would you say, this is who I am? Obviously not, I presume. If anyone differs, they are free to leave. Would you identify yourself as your kneecap on your left leg? Or as your elbow on your right arm? Or as your nose or your ears? Nay, this is not who I am. Why then, if you do not identify yourself with any of the specific parts of your body, why then would you identify yourself with or as the physical body as a whole? So, you're all spiritual people. So you realize you are not the body. That means what? It means your mind is not the body. Your mind is more than the body, which means in your mind, you can step outside the body. So I invite you, as you are willing, mentally in your mind, you are stepping back from your body. You are going behind your body, up from your body. You are rising behind and above your body. Mentally, you are now outside your physical body, looking down mentally on your body, sitting in the chair. Now you become aware of this room in which you are sitting. The room is more than your physical body. There is space outside your body, but it is still confined by 4 walls, just as your body is confined by certain limitations. So now you become aware of the walls, the ceiling, the roof in the room. And you are now mentally stepping outside this room, back, up. You are rising above the room, looking at the room. It is as if you're looking at the room as it is inside, but you are outside of it, looking just at the room. Now you know that this room is in a building. So now I'm asking you to mentally step back from this building. You are going back, you are rising above it. And even though you may not have physically seen the building from above, you are in your mind's eye above this building. And now you know that the building is in some environment. For you who are physically here, it is in a city. And again, You are allowing yourself to rise above the city. You are looking down upon the city as if you were in an air balloon, floating above the city. And of course, you can step even further back, and we will do this now. You are now even higher, as if you were in an airplane, but it's an airplane that's standing still. You are looking down upon this country you are in, and you are allowing yourself to float even higher, where you look at the continent, and now you are so high that you are beginning to see the curvature of the earth. And you are floating even beyond this, where you are now from a distance looking at the earth, the blue planet with its oceans and continents, clouds, but you are beyond it. And now, instead of going further and further into space, we are transcending the material world, rising into the emotional level. And at the emotional level, you may still have various feelings that are coming up. Perhaps a certain unease of being outside the body and what that means. But you may remember that when you were a small child, you were scared to go to bed for a variety of reasons. You had this feeling of fear. But would you now identify yourself as that fear or as that child that was afraid? So if you do not, you know you are more than that feeling. And if you are more than one feeling, doesn't that mean you are more than all feelings? So can you not then step back from your feelings, the feeling body, rise above it, and perhaps it is harder to step outside of the feeling body than the physical body, but you are now above the physical, so you are able to sense that I, who is generating this voice, can reach you. And I am now reaching my hand down and offering you my hand. And if you grab it and hold on to it, I will send to you a sense of peace so you can rise above your feelings. And as you rise with me, you rise into the mental body. And you may have some thoughts come up. You may even remember that many years ago when you were a child, you were thinking a lot about these bad boys on your street that you were afraid were going to come after you. But have you thought about this lately? You might remember it, but you're not identified with that thought that happened so many years ago. So if you are more than that thought, perhaps you are more than all thoughts. Here you might feel a certain sense of unease again, maybe even a feeling of fear, because you are so used to thinking. I remember being in physical embodiment and always thinking. We are so used to thinking that we may not identify ourselves with a certain thought, but we can easily identify ourselves as thinking beings. And therefore we can come to think that if we are not thinking, we don't exist. There's a part of the thinking mind that will project the thought into you that if you stop thinking, you will stop existing, you will die. Because the mind thinks it's going to die if you stop thinking. But now take a closer look at this. You can identify you are here. And there's a part of your mind that is projecting at you that you should not stop thinking. But if there's a part of your mind that's projecting at you, that means you are not the mind that is projecting at you. So are you the one who's thinking, or is it the mind who is thinking? And again, I offer you my hand. And if you grab it, I will radiate into your mind, into your sense of self, however you see it at this point, that you are real. But that thoughts come and go. Therefore, you are not the thinker. The mind is the thinker. And so therefore, if you are more than the thinker, can you not rise above the thinker without thinking you are rising, but just allowing it to happen? You see, the conscious you is not the thinker. The conscious you has a natural pull towards the I am presence. You are thinking your way away from that pull. But if you do not think, then the conscious you will naturally rise beyond the thinker. So you're holding my hand with one of yours, and now you take the other hand and you say, bye-bye, thinker. I don't need you right now. And now you rise to the identity level. And at the identity level, at first you may think there's thoughts, but they are not actually thoughts the same way as they are at the mental level. Because the thoughts have a certain reasoning process. They start out with a certain premise, they go through a certain process, and they reach a conclusion. But at the identity level, there is no process. There is just a mental image being projected at you. This is who you are. This is how you're supposed to be when you are that kind of a person. There's no reasoning. You're reasoning at the mental level, not at the identity level. You just are, or rather, that's the projection. There was a time when you were 5 years old, and you identified yourself as a child. Are you still that child? Well, certainly your physical body isn't. You can easily tell from looking in the mirror. So why would the rest of you be that 5-year-old? Certainly your sense of identity has moved on with leaps and bounds beyond how you saw yourself when you were 5. So if you experience that your identity has changed in this lifetime, what does that mean? Again, tune in. There is a part of your mind that is projecting a mental image at you that this is who you are. But if there is something that isn't you that's projecting at you that this is who you are, then you are not what is projecting. What is projecting is a part of your mind, your identity body. It is a structure in the identity body. It is a self in your identity body. And when you recognize that something is projecting at you, you realize you are not what is projecting. And what does that mean? It means you are not what is being projected either. You can take it on, like you take on an overcoat, but you can take it off as you take off an overcoat. And again, I'm offering you my hand, and I'm saying, do you want to take off that image that is being projected at you from your identity body? Then allow yourself to rise. Allow your conscious you to rise out of the identity body. You're rising up, and you are now looking down at your identity body. I'm not asking you at this point to look at your I am presence, to look at me. I'm asking you to realize that you are outside your identity body, looking at your identity body. But you're not alone. You are here with me. I'm holding your hand, metaphorically speaking, because the conscious you, of course, has no hands. So instead of saying I'm holding your hand, let us say you are enveloped in my presence. However you can see yourself doesn't matter. What matters is you sense my presence, and we together are looking at your identity body. And now I am asking you to take your notepad and pen. Take your notepad and pen. Without thinking, without analyzing, without any preconceived opinions, I will count down from 10 to 0. And the moment I say 0, you start writing whatever comes to you. No analyzing, no hesitation. The moment you hear me say 0, you write whatever comes to you. So I will start counting. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.5, 1.25, 1, 3/4, a half, a quarter, 0, right. Okay, so now you stop writing. Obviously, you can take the recording of this and you can repeat it anytime you want. The important point here is that you strive to follow the exercise, step outside of your four lower bodies, look at your identity body and just write. There is no right or wrong answer. What you need to write is whatever comes to you. And over time, it will, of course, change. And what does that mean? It means that you will gradually unravel the mental images that are stored in these cells in your identity body and that are being projected at you all the time. And when you then later look at the writing, you can use this to expose the separate cells that color your relationship to Earth at the deepest level. It is the highest level, therefore the deepest, because it's the first level that colors how the conscious you sees itself on Earth. And this is what we aim to help you uncover and unravel. There will, of course, be layers. That's why you cannot just do this exercise once and think you have seen it all, because you will see what you are ready to see right at this moment. What it is you are dealing with at your present level of consciousness that will take you to a higher level. And then once you get to that higher level, you can see what you're dealing with that will take you to an even higher level. So let us say you are at the 48th level of consciousness. When you find this exercise, you can theoretically do it all the way up to the 144th level, even though when you go to the higher levels, you will not have the same need to do it. But still. So my aim for this exercise was simply to get you started. Now you have all had these experiences of stepping outside of the outer mind, and hopefully you had an experience of that also during this exercise. So you have now this frame of reference, which means you can look at the contents of your identity body from the vantage point of not being inside the identity body. Do you understand? Do you grasp why this is important? We have given you many teachings. You may have come from another spiritual tradition. You find these teachings about the four lower bodies. You are told that you need to start looking at how you identify yourself. But what will you do? You will start looking at your identity body through the filter of the separate selves you have in your identity body, or at least the selves. And so what does that mean? It means that you may be able and willing to see certain things in your identity body. It could be, I don't really need to identify myself with a local football club. I am more than just a fan of this or that football club. I don't need to identify myself with a particular car brand or a particular sport or with a particular hair color. And so you may be able to overcome some of these more outer identities. But there will be deeper senses, deeper selves that you are looking through And here is, of course, the essential truth about a separate self. And this is essentially why our teaching about separate selves is so essential. It is this: as long as you're looking through a particular self, you can never see that self. It cannot be done. If someone put yellow contact lenses on your eyes when you were born, you will never be able to question that the sky is green. And so only when you go through the exercise, step outside your identity body, will you be able to gradually come to see those more subtle senses of self, those more subtle separate selves that you have in your identity body. And only then will you be able to question them and gradually disidentify the conscious you from them, so that the conscious you can finally look at a particular self and say, I now see that this is unreal. This is not who I am, but this is not even how the world is. And therefore, I can let the self die. For I will still be I. In fact, I will be more I than when I was seeing my I through the self. And this can gradually help you come to question these contents of your identity body. Now, you may say, why are we starting at the identity level? Because it is the highest level. And as we have said before, it sets certain parameters for how your mental body can think, how your emotional body can feel, and how your physical body can be. You will be surprised how many characteristics of the physical body are actually starting at the identity level, where the cells in your identity body sets the parameters that are carried down into the mental, carried down into your emotional, and therefore determines specific conditions, even diseases, in your physical body, starting at the identity level. So if you cannot question the condition at the identity, how can you unravel it? Because what did I just say? You cannot see a self when the conscious you is inside the self. Well, you cannot see a self at the identity level from the level of the mental body. You cannot see a self at the mental body through the emotional body. And you cannot see a self at the emotional body through the physical. Only when a conscious you steps outside the physical can you see something in the emotional. Only when you step outside the emotional can you see something in the mental. Only by stepping outside the mental can you see the lower levels of the identity. But only when you step outside the identity can you really see what is going on in the identity body. So we have chosen to have you start there, because whatever message you got, even if you didn't get a clear message now, you can certainly get it in the coming days or even in the time after. You can deal with that self right now. You can deal with that during this conference. And this will be a good start in the healing process. Naturally, there will be levels, there will be layers. We do not expect that we can have you heal everything in 3 days. But what we aim to do is give you a process that you can then apply. And therefore, over time, make some real progress. So with this, I have given you what I wanted to give you in this installment. And so I seal you in the heart that I use to carry out my office as the Divine Mother. How do you see me as the Divine Mother? I hope you can go beyond seeing me as anything and just experience my unconditional love for you. Each and every one of you who is here physically, who is here on the internet, who will ever find this teaching and decide to go through this time-consuming process to apply the teaching. I hope you will experience my love. For my love is beyond time and space. It is beyond any condition in your physical body, any condition in your emotional body, any condition in the mental body, any condition in the identity body. It is boundless, beyond conditions. So be sealed in that love. Based on what we wrote, if any of you, are any of you willing to share what you wrote down? What I have to do is I'll have to repeat or summarize what you're saying so that the webinar people can hear it, because they can't hear it. And if we, because it all goes in through this microphone to the webinar, it has the advantage that you don't hear background noise. But and we could flip the camera around, but then you'll be on camera, and some people are uncomfortable with that. So that's why we are a little bit in a catch-22. So anybody want to share anything? Yeah. So you feel you have to be on Earth for other people, even if it's costing you your sense of peace. Yeah. I'm just repeating for the webinar. Yeah. Yeah. So you give too much of yourself to others, you end up being sick. Yeah. So wouldn't you say that that comes from a separate self? Yeah. So that's an important insight to yes, that's what I work on that. Yeah. Yeah. Really. Yeah. Because that's actually important. You know, how you can make yourself sick by not taking care of yourself and always doing for others.
It's another thing. But
see, that was going to be my next question. You know, yes. if these people, you call them good people, and they probably are, but as you say, they take your energy and they don't want to change. Yeah, they want change, but they don't want to change themselves. So that's why I'm saying, you know, they might be good people, but and it may be okay to give to them, but not at the cost of yourself, because you know, then there's a limit to how long you can keep giving if you get sick. So yeah, so that's a very good insight. I mean, I'm sorry for saying that. Every insight is, of course, equally important, but nevertheless, what I mean with that is that it probably applies to a lot of people. Because I met many spiritual people who do the same thing. You know, we feel like we can't say no, we have to give. Yeah, so you felt like you were so out of your body that you couldn't write. Yeah. Well, that's fine also, because part of the purpose of the exercise is to experience being out of the body. But she was guiding the exercise so that we were still looking at the identity body from the outside. And so the whole idea of the countdown was that would prepare us to write. So, but it's fine. You can just repeat it sometime and then see what you get. Yeah, I would say you need to be thinking about this thinking thing. You think about whether you're overthinking.
What does it mean?
Yeah. Yeah, but you actually, do you see what I'm saying? It's like you were sort of standing back from the exercise, looking at the exercise instead of just flowing with the exercise. So it was like there was a part of your mind that couldn't let go and just experience. And so next time you do it, you just need to sort of let go, and maybe that's easier for you when you're sitting by yourself and instead of in a group of people. So, but it's, I mean, in something like this, I understand what you're saying, because I think when I was younger, I would have done the same thing. My mind would have been constantly evaluating. But the whole purpose was to get out of the mind, and just experience, and therefore spontaneously write whatever comes to you. That it's not something you are thinking from inside the mind. You are actually outside looking at the mind. And therefore you get something you couldn't get from inside. That's what she said after the exercise. She was saying that you can't see yourself while you're inside of it.
Yeah.
So you're more than the mind, and you can step outside and you don't need to analyze. Yeah, but that's also
Stop.
yeah. But see, that also is, you are trying to think what I should write. But what she said was, don't think, don't analyze, just spontaneously write whatever comes to you, whatever comes. No evaluation. See, there's no should or shouldn't there. So next time you do it, you can maybe strive to get in that, because that's the neutral mind, where the monkey mind, as you call it, is not monkeying around. Yeah. See, so you're another reason she had it. Yeah. But I thought it was so interesting that she did that, because it was like as a last attempt to get people to switch out of thinking, by making them laugh, and then for her, hopefully it works. Yeah. So anyone else? Yeah. So that's actually a good idea what you're saying there, because he's saying that he had all these thoughts, what should I write? And then he decided just to write that down. And then after a while, you got the further thought that I'm ashamed of what I wrote, and it leads to I'm ashamed of myself. Yeah. So that's a very important insight also. That's obviously also a separate self. You're not ashamed of yourself. There's a self that's ashamed of itself. Yeah. So he's saying that it's a general thing that when you don't know what to write, then after you say that, you often get another thought, and then something comes. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So you wrote more wrote what your thoughts were at the time. Yeah. But I think that's okay to begin with, and then as you do the exercise more, you can hopefully learn to step out of the mind and just flow with the exercise and get something, about your identity. Yeah. So she wrote that, I'm not sure I remember it all, but I'm not worthy compared to ascended masters and people around you. I hate you, Mother Mary, because of conditions on earth. I don't want to share my love because nobody is worth it, or okay. Yeah. Well, that's, again, that's a good result in the sense that you see a separate self in your identity body, that you are not worthy. And so I think it's just a matter of repeating the exercise, maybe getting more clarity about it until you can come to see it and see that it really is just a separate self that feels it's not worthy, because it's comparing yourself, it's comparing itself based on certain criteria. And what Mother Mary was saying, what Archangel Raphael was saying, is that we need to go beyond those criteria we have, so that in our identity bodies, we are not comparing. There's no value judgment. Nobody's better or worse than anybody else. And when we can come to see that, maybe we can separate ourselves from the self and just let it go. Obviously, you don't hate Mother Mary, a separate self does. But when you think about all the teachings they have given, Mother Mary isn't responsible for conditions on earth. Human beings are. But I understand the feeling, because there are many people, both religious people, but also atheists and spiritual people who think that God should have done something to prevent what's happening on earth. So they project that God is responsible for what's happening on earth because God should have stopped it. And that really goes back to the whole Christian idea of God, that God is almighty and all good. So if he was almighty, he should be able to remove evil from earth. And if he hasn't done it, it must be either he's not almighty or he's not good, because a good God would want to remove evil. That's the classical problem of evil that had tripped up, millions of people. But the solution to it is free will, and that God hasn't created these conditions. God has given us free will and has allowed us to create the conditions, because otherwise God would actually be a tyrant. So you want to control your life. And what was the second thing? Frustrated that things are the way they are. Yeah. But that's then also a good start. As you do it again, you might get some more clarity of what is the frustration. That would be my question. Okay, yeah. Because that's important to explore that. Where does that? But that's also an important point about dealing with everyday life, especially when you have children. It's like as spiritual people, we can often feel. I mean, especially when I was younger and had children, I often felt that I never had time for my spiritual activities. They didn't have enough time for it. And I would say today that that's because I had this sense in my identity body that there is everyday activities and spiritual activities, and that my everyday activities aren't spiritual. And when I started questioning that, it became easier. But now, of course, now I don't have children anymore, so that also made it easier. So, yeah, of course. See, that's your problem. You think I'm somehow different. And I was never frustrated when I had kids, and and they were always well behaved. Yeah. That's a popular assumption, which of course is not the case, So on that note, I'll share what I wrote, because that'll make you see that I'm not so different. So I have, of course, done these exercises before. I've done, like Rauno talked about, the Great Divine Director Novena. Do you know what that is? Great Divine Director, or the Divine Director. So there's a specific decree to the Divine Director. And you give it, I think it's 9 times, or 14. Okay, 14 times. And then you have a notepad and a pen, and you just write down whatever comes to you spontaneously without thinking about it. So I've done that starting many years ago. So I've gotten to a point where I don't think about it. There's nothing right or wrong. So there's no evaluation. And it was the same thing here. When she said 0, I picked up the pen and I wrote this: I am a flawed being that cannot do anything right on earth. I should never have come here, and I just need to disappear so I do not embarrass myself any more than I have already done. So you see, I still have this self in my identity body that feels this way. So I'm not so different. But you have had your day. But it's just, this is the purpose of the exercise, you see, that we uncover these things that we haven't seen before because they're so subtle, or we really don't want to look at them. And we might have another self that, I would say, I'm not sure I could have written this a year or 2 years, and certainly not 5 or 10 years ago, because I would have had a self that had an image of how I should be as a spiritual teacher, and therefore I couldn't have a self like this. So I couldn't acknowledge it. So I wouldn't even be able to see it. So I actually think that was good that it came out that way. But it's also, again, this, I was just totally neutral, no thoughts. And I actually started, it's not even really my normal handwriting. It's sort of a more almost childish or, very sort of not very correct handwriting, but I just sort of, it just sort of flowed. And that's why I think it was a genuine thing that came out. So it's again this, there's nothing right or wrong here. It's a matter of seeing what is there, whatever it is, and being free of it, letting go of it. And that's why, the more neutral you can be, the more you can see these things, because this is what she said. You can't see it when you're looking through it. You're looking through a self, you cannot see it. So she also had a sense of being worthless, but then another self that said, you shouldn't have this, and therefore you divert your attention from it by focusing on other people. Yeah. And I think that's also very common with spiritual people. And this is actually, if you think about it, this is what the fallen beings love, to put us in this kind of situation where we are in this catch-22, because we have one self that feels a certain way. And why does that self feel that way? Because the fallen beings have projected at us that we are worthless. I mean, obviously, this is not something I came up with. This is originally a projection from the fallen beings, that we are flawed, we shouldn't be here, and we just should go away so we don't disturb their little cozy plans on this earth. But then when we become spiritual and we have this idea of how a spiritual person should be, we create this other self that now suppresses the first self. And if we suppress the first self, we can't resolve it. So then we're stuck, and the second self prevents us from seeing it. And so this is where the fallen ones, you have this saying in America, you laugh all the way to the bank. And that's what the fallen beings do. They are laughing all the way, because now they don't have to bother with us anymore, because we are neutralizing ourselves so that we can't threaten them, because we are in this fix in our own minds. Yeah. So at first he felt like he was the flame of peace, but he was wondering if he was blocking out the negatives. But then later you also tuned into this, I'm not good enough. And that's a very general projection, It's kind of like we come from a natural planet where we have never really been accused of being wrong or not good enough. I mean, I'm a flawed being that cannot do anything right on Earth. You have never encountered that on a natural planet, because there isn't that consciousness that, first of all, evaluates that you could be flawed. It's like, it's not even that what you do is wrong on a natural planet. You don't even have the right and wrong. You're just, oh yeah, I could do this better, or I could do this differently, or you're constantly growing, but it's not a right and wrong thing. So you've never really felt that you did anything wrong, and you've certainly never been accused of being flawed, or there's something wrong with you, or you don't have a right to be here, because obviously on a natural planet we experience we have a right to be here. So then we come to this little, and I'm glad there was one person that could look at the planet with love. I'm not there yet. So we come to this little cozy planet, and we are immediately accused that we should never come here. We are completely wrong. And they try to manipulate us into these situations where, if you take the My Lives book, it's sort of typical for a situation where we feel that because we are here to alleviate suffering, we shouldn't create suffering. But it seems like we did create suffering. And the fallen beings put us in a situation where whatever we do leads to suffering for people. So we feel we were wrong, we shouldn't have done this, and we probably shouldn't have come here, because I think it's what I tune into in myself, at least, is this this moment where you feel this accusation, and you're just going to shock because you've never encountered it before and you don't know what to do with it. Because the fallen beings, this is the trick with the duality consciousness, is that in the duality consciousness, there's no way to fully refute what they're accusing you of. So if they are setting up the situation where it seems like your decision led to suffering for people and you think you shouldn't have caused suffering, you're already trapped there. And there's no way to refute what they're saying other than reconnecting, to your I Am Presence and the masters, because there's nothing here on earth that there's no argument you can come up with. So I have tuned into this in myself that there's this shock. I mean, how could this happen? I mean, I came here with the best of intentions, and now they're accusing me like I'm the worst person that could ever exist, and I've created this immense catastrophe, and it's all my fault. And your reaction almost is, I don't even want to deal with this, so I should just disappear so I don't embarrass myself any more than I already have, because you feel you embarrassed yourself. And I think it's, for me at least, it was this, just the very fact that somebody could accuse me was so embarrassing to myself, whether it was a reasonable accusation or not. Just that experience of being accused was so embarrassing to me that I just wanted to crawl into a hole and die. And I think many avatars have had a similar shock of coming to Earth and suddenly realizing that we couldn't even imagine what it was like. And we might even feel like, what, was I naive for not seeing what kind of a planet I'm coming to? Was I stupid for not realizing what I'm getting into? And see, this is again where, if we have this idea that as these wonderful spiritual people, we should never have any negative feelings, we are trapped. That's why the person on the webinar is actually good to say, well, I hate you because of all these things that are happening on Earth, because it's important to recognize that so we can look at it and realize it's not actually the conscious you that's feeling this. It is a separate self that was created here on Earth. And it's just a matter of getting out of it, And that's why I also think, time and time again, the absolutely revolutionary thing about the master's teachings about this, the conscious you and the subconscious selves, is this, that the subconscious self is created out of duality. And it's presenting a problem, but the problem has no solution. The only way out is to just let the self die. Just come to see the illusion, see it's an illusion, and just drop it. You're not trying to defend anything. That's what I realized. The fallen beings, they shock us by accusing us. And our default reaction is to, after the shock wears off, we try to defend ourselves. Or we try to accuse them back and say, well, you're not perfect either. Why are you wanting me to be perfect? And so we're trapped in the spiral. And this can go on indefinitely until we say, hey, I'm not playing the game anymore. I'm just not playing. But in order to do that, we have to see the illusion that we came to believe when we created the self that we have. Like the self that feels I'm flawed and I shouldn't have come. I have to now unravel that illusion and see, why did I believe that? What was the image of myself that I came to accept? And then when I see that that's an illusion, I can let it go. And that's the way out. And that's what's revolutionary about this, because otherwise you're just trapped. You're just trapped, and you can't get out of it. And that's why I said, when the fallen beings get us in that situation, and say, okay, we got him, let's focus on somebody else. He's going to keep himself busy for the next 10,000 embodiments, so let's not worry about him for now. And we just have to come to a point where we say, I played this game long enough. I'm not going to play it anymore. No, that's Jesus, the prince of this world, comes and has nothing in me. It's the Buddha, because many Buddhists think that, or they don't make light of this, that he was confronted by the demons of Mara. But what the demons of Mara was doing was try to see if he had any separate self left that they could get him to react to anything. And then he wouldn't have been free to walk away. So that's my goal, at least, to come to that point where I can just say, I don't have to defend myself on earth. I don't have to create any image of myself. I don't have to do anything. Don't have to live up to any expectations. I can look back and say, there's nothing here that pulls on me. You know. And so that's my goal anyway. We'll see when it's attained. and maybe it isn't going to be attained fully until I'm ready to ascend, which probably is going to be a while. So I've sort of given up on this idea, as I said earlier, that you have to overcome all selves in embodiment, because these selves I'm talking about here, about us being flawed, or this is obviously dualistic. This is not what we took on just to go down and take embodiment. So those are the ones we have to be free of, and those I think we can be free of, and then we can be more in peace with being on this planet. So sorry I was going on there. Anybody else who wants to share anything? So she was so eager to do the exercise and write something down, and then her pen stopped working. And then she was fooling with that to get it to work, and she managed to write something, but she realized that was actually her attachment to do a good job of writing something down. That was what you're dealing with right now, that you need to see. To give up the expectation. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we often get into as spiritual people. And, you know, this is what the Master have talked about, that they have this dilemma, because they have to give us a goal, you know. And it's like we talked about with nirvana, you know, so many Buddhists are focused on this nirvana or enlightenment, and they look at it as this fantastic state. And so you create all of these images and you want to live up to it. And as a result of wanting to live up to the positive, you are afraid to look at anything in your psychology that makes you not look so good. I remember this, especially in the Summit Lighthouse, you know, there was this sort of collective awareness. Let's just call it a collective beast, because that's what it was, that you're supposed to be a good Chela. In order to be a good Chela, there were certain things you didn't do, and there were certain things you were supposed to do. You didn't drive a red car or a black car. You didn't wear orange clothes. You didn't smoke. You didn't curse. You never lost your harmony. You've always, you know, cool, calm, and collected. And you were supposed to decree, you know, 25 hours a day, maybe 25 and a half if you were really good. And it was just never enough. It was just never good enough. But the result was, and I remember it in myself, you know, it was like, I wanted to live up to this because I wanted to be a good Chela. And so I didn't want to look at anything in myself that needed to be resolved. And for the first several years I was in the Summit, I wasn't open really. And if somebody tried to tell me something, I just tried to, you know, brush it off. And I saw, you see how the whole movement was like that. I mean, the people who stayed there, they got into this, putting out on the outer facade. And many people didn't go any deeper in the psychology. And then in the beginning of the 1990s, the Masters, through Elizabeth, they started talking about it in dictations. We needed to resolve our psychology. And after they had said it, I don't know how many times, I started noticing that in almost every dictation, they were talking about it. It was kind of like they were saying, and by the way, you should work on resolving your psychology, you know. And so I realized that, and that's when I decided to do it. But I can see that even when I went into therapy, I was still trying to maintain a certain image of myself, that I was a good person, you know, that I was okay. And you can see how this ties in with this, I'm a flawed being that cannot do anything right. This was such a shock for me that you tie it in with, it's like, I need to disappear so I don't embarrass myself any further. You feel like you've embarrassed yourself in an ultimate degree. So anything else that isn't perfect about you will be unbearable because it adds to the sense of embarrassment. So you have to deny it. You have to brush it off. You have to pretend like it's not there. And you have to say, well, if I give all these decrees and do all the right things, I must be okay. So then I can avoid that feeling of embarrassment. But the thing is, as I have learned over the years, with many other things, it's never going to go away that way. Because you're like the donkey pushing the carrot in front of you. And the faster you run, the faster you're pushing the carrot, And so you think if I just run fast enough, I'll catch up to it. But you never will. You never will. Until you say, I don't want the damn carrot. I don't even like carrots. And you just give up trying to reach that goal that was defined here on earth, and that can never be fulfilled. It's an impossible goal. And that's why I can see that, especially over the last couple of years, more and more of this image of myself has dropped away. And that's why if you look at my YouTube videos, I'm just talking. I'm just sharing. I'm just expressing myself. I don't care what people's reactions are, because I'm not trying to put on an image that I'm some kind of special person or some kind of special spiritual teacher. This is who I am right now. So this is what I'm sharing, And before there was always this self that was always looking at myself in every situation, evaluating, is this going to embarrass me? Because I have realized that it may be different for different people, but my basic feeling about Earth is embarrassment. That was my first feeling that happened when I came to Earth. I felt embarrassed. And I felt embarrassed by seeing some of the things that are happening on Earth, that people are doing to each other. But I felt embarrassed that I had come here, or that I couldn't fix it. Because on a natural planet, I could fix anything. But here, I can fix nothing. And then I reacted, and then I felt embarrassed that I reacted. And so you create this spiral that leads to more and more of this. And I have worked on it for a long time, but it's only within the last year or two that I've come to the point where I can say, well, okay, there may still be some remnants of it left, but I'm not so embarrassed about being embarrassed that I can't acknowledge that feeling, and that I can't acknowledge that this is my basic approach to being on Earth, is this embarrassment. And that's the first step, the most important step to starting to unravel it. And I think there's still some cells left. But, at least I can acknowledge the problem. So you probably all have something that's unique to you, or maybe you have a similar thing. But it's this, you see it so much in and it's again this, many people have grown up, we feel like we were outsiders. So me, embarrassment. So nobody could understand me when I was a child. I had all of these questions about life, and nobody wanted to talk about it. My parents, they didn't know what to deal with it. My teachers in school, my friend, nobody. So I quickly learned not to talk about it because it felt embarrassing when I got that reaction from people. So then I find the spiritual path, and now I'm thinking, here's a relief for my embarrassment. If I just do all the right things, then I won't be embarrassed. So it's like this colors your approach to the spiritual path, where now you're trying to use a spiritual teaching to suppress the sense of being embarrassed. And you think that if you just ignore it, eventually it's going to go away. But if I've been embodiment for a couple of million years, that it hasn't gone away in that time. It's not likely it's going to do it by ignoring it for another 10 or 20 years. So, but this was so strong in me. It's only in the last couple of years I've even been able to acknowledge it. So you can see I've been on the path for a long time. I've done a lot of work on psychology. I've been into therapy, but still this was lying underneath it all. And I just wasn't able to acknowledge it because it was too embarrassing to acknowledge I was feeling embarrassed. And, you know, they're just, I think for all of us, you know, there has to come that point where we just say, I'm willing to look at it, whatever it is. Oh. And I remember, you know, back, as I said, back in the 1990s, the master started talking about working on your psychology. And I started asking Mother Mary especially, help me see what I need to see. And I can look back and I've seen so many things in my psychology. But I still had this underlying issue that I wasn't able to see because it was too painful. And I'm not trying to push you, because what I'm trying to say is I wasn't ready. You couldn't have made me see this 5 years ago. So I'm not trying to push you. I'm just trying to inspire you that it doesn't take you as long as it took me, you know, because we have tools now. You know, we have the master's office to help us. And this conference can be, for each of you, if you're willing, it can be a breakthrough for you to start seeing your underlying issue. You know, what really happened when you came to Earth? How did you really react? And if you can do that and really ask for the master's help and accept the master's help, I hope it won't take you as long as it's taken me to get there. And, you know, I mean, it just comes to, you know, when I think back at this, I can see that what this did to me was what the masters talked about in Kazakhstan. Saint Germain talked about it right in the end. I was so focused on myself because I had this wound that I was covering over, and everything I did was aimed at keeping that wound covered so I wouldn't feel the pain. So it was a total focus on myself. You could say, well, I've been on a spiritual path for a long time. Now I've been a messenger for the masters for over 20 years. But still there was this underlying issue. But then there was also in me the desire to be free. And that's why I pushed myself to do this, what I'm doing. Because in a sense, you could say, given the position I'm in as a messenger for the masters and spiritual teachings, what could be more embarrassing than admitting that I'm not perfect? And I have this sense of being embarrassed. So it could have been the perfect camouflage, but by pushing myself to be in a position, I also pushed myself towards the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I think we all have both. If you didn't have the desire to be free of this, why would you be sitting here? Why would you have studied all these teachings? You know, you may still have a pain that you're not willing to or ready to look at, but you also have this enormous desire to be free of it, or you wouldn't be here in the first place. You'd just be living a normal life out there, or you would be in some kind of spiritual teaching where they promise you that you can enter nirvana without looking at your psychology. There are so many of them out there, hundreds of them. You know, just come and sit at the feet of the guru and absorb his radiation, and you will be awakened sometime in the future. You know, or whatever it is, give enough violet flame and you'll ascend. Yeah, and so she's saying that nothing can, none of these teachings can give us that inner peace, and they can't. They can cover over the pain, and it can continue to cover over the pain. But they can't. The only thing that gives us peace is to look at the pain and work through it. And that's why I'm saying, if you're in this teaching, you must have this desire to be free of it. And so it's a matter of coming to that point that I came to, where because I remember, as I said, I would ask the masters, help me see this, help me see this. But it was like there was always I didn't recognize it consciously, but it always says, help me see all of these things out there, but not this big thing in here, because that's too much for me. And there came a point where I said, okay, Jesus, just help me see what I'm not seeing. I'm willing to look at anything. And that's when I really started getting out of this focus on self. And I can still see this in some of you, that you are still you have this focus on the self. And I'm not trying to blame you at all. I'm just saying, being free of that focus on self, that is peace. That is really peace. Where you can just, I don't know, it just doesn't matter anymore. You're not trying to cover over some kind of pain. You're not trying to put on some kind of appearance. You're just, you can just be who you are. And even if you're not perfect, if you still have selves to work on, that's okay, because you're still not identified with it. You have just stepped out of that sense of identification. And, I just hope that all of you can achieve that and not take 47 years like I did to come to that point. We all have our individual path, and it's all going to take time for each of us. But, I think if I had had a little more of this kind of instruction earlier, I probably could have shortened the time. Or maybe I wasn't meant to, who knows? But you can be so over-eager that you're pushing yourself too much. And I was that when I first found the Summit Lighthouse. I was so eager to do all the right things and do all the decrees. And it became an excuse for not looking at myself, because I had to basically save the world before I could look at my psychology. And since that wasn't happening, I had the perfect excuse for not looking at myself. But you can also be too complacent, where you see in many of these spiritual movements, you have these people that say, it's all good, right? I've heard this several times. It's all good, right? Because whenever you talk about, like dark forces or problems on the planet or problems in your psychology, no, but it's all good. So if I just keep doing what I'm doing, eventually I'll get there. So you could go too far in either direction. So you have to find and that's why I'm saying, there comes a point where you just have to step back, look at your approach and say, have I been unbalanced to either that side or that side? Do I need to maybe stop pushing in this direction because it's now an excuse for not looking at myself? Or have I become too complacent, thinking if I just keep doing 3 hours of violet flame a day, I'll eventually qualify for my ascension? That's what I realized many years. And I remember this situation in the Summit Lighthouse. We were at this Summit University, and there was this lady who was giving this talk on the ascension. She was supposed to be Serapis-based twin flame, so she's supposed to have an understanding of what the ascension was about. And I was just sitting there, neutral state of mind, and all of a sudden I had this experience that, no, but the ascension is a choice. You have to make a choice to leave everything on earth behind. She was talking about you fulfill this outer requirement and that outer requirement and that outer requirement. And I realized, no, but you're standing there. You have to look back at earth like Gautama under the bo tree. And if there's anything you haven't fulfilled, anything you haven't done, anything you want to do, you can't leave the earth behind, because you have to choose to leave it behind. And that's when I really started realizing that it's all about psychology, because I have to resolve all of these attachments I have to earth, to doing anything. And so I realized that doing all this outer pushing with decreeing and decreeing and decreeing, it just wasn't enough. It would never get me there, is what I saw. I would not qualify for my ascension by continuing to do everything that the Summit Lighthouse prescribed that I should do. I saw this clear as day. I would not qualify for my ascension by doing this, even though that was the claim in the Summit Lighthouse. If you kept doing all these outer things, you were guaranteed to make your ascension after this lifetime. And I just saw it. No, that is not going to happen. I need to do something else. And that's when I then went into therapy and started. Okay, so how does that relate to what I said about being focused on self? Well, back then, I was I was very focused on putting on the outer appearance of fulfilling all the outer requirements to be a good Chela as it was defined in the Summit Lighthouse. And that's what I call the focus on self. And what I mean with that is actually you're focused on your outer self, your outer sense of self, as you see yourself in the identity body. And it was partly also caused by this desire to cover over my sense of embarrassment, so that if I'm a good enough Chela, I have nothing to feel embarrassed about because I'm fulfilling all these requirements that come from the Ascended Masters. And today, in the last couple of years, it's just like, I don't have any outer facade or image I need to live up to anymore. So I can just be myself and be at peace. And it doesn't mean that I've overcome all selves. No, I'm in no way claiming that. You can see this thing that came up. But I also have other selves, and I regularly see something. So, but I have given up this idea that I should be perfect, that I should live up to any image. No.
Because image of how you should be.
Yeah. A few years ago, if I had written this down at a conference, I probably would have just folded it and put it in my pocket and not shared it. Because, you know, if I'm a messenger and I've been on the spiritual path for so long, I shouldn't have something that this embarrassing. Today, it doesn't bother me. Because if it can help any of you, why shouldn't I share it? You know, it's because it's not about me maintaining an image. It's about me sharing the process I've gone through. Hopefully it can help somebody else. You know, and hopefully other people say, well, if he doesn't have anything to be embarrassed about, why should I? Why should I be afraid? Why should I, you know, whatever it is for you individually, why should I be trapped in this pattern? You know, and what I'm trying to also say is there's nothing special about me. I have just given up something. And anybody can give up. But it's just, we have to come to the point where we see and accept, oh, I don't have to do it. I don't have to solve a problem here. I can just walk away from it. You know, I can just say to these fallen beings, hasta la vista, baby. I won't be back. You know, I mean, you can just, and this is what your ego and the fallen beings will scream at you. And sometimes they'll scream it at you through other people. It is, you can't just leave me. You can't just walk away. But we can. That is our most fundamental right on a planet like Earth, to just walk away. Doesn't mean I'm gonna leave the planet anytime soon, but what I'm saying is you're not walking away from the planet. You are walking away from this in your own mind, and from because it's the self that makes these projections seem important to you, because you feel that whenever you get this projection, you have to do something about it. You have to react to it, and it you know, I felt for whatever reason I had to respond to this when I was accused, because I shouldn't have been accused when I come with the best of intentions. They shouldn't have accused me. So the fact that they do accuse me means, well, I can't just ignore it. But why couldn't I have ignored it? Who said that I should have ignored it? You know, and so we have to come to this point where we realize, yeah, I couldn't do it back then, but I can certainly do it now. Just say, what does it matter? So you feel you're taking a risk with everything you do because you can be judged. Yeah, and see, this is again a trap of the fallen beings, because God and the Ascended Masters are not accusing us. The fallen beings are. But if they can make us believe that it's God, no, the highest authority, then we are again in this catch-22. And we have to come to a point where we see that this just comes from a separate self and it's a complete illusion. And the masters are not judging us. I mean, they're saying this over and over again. And but this actually, interestingly, in the Summit Lighthouse, most people had the impression that the masters are judging us, because if you're not a good Chela, if you don't live up to the requirements, then El Moya is going to come down on you like a load of bricks, you know. And it took me a while to unravel this, but it actually was helped that I experienced El Moya as completely pink and completely unconditional. I think the only way to really overcome that is to experience that. You experience the unconditional love from the masters. And then you can see, oh, it can come from the masters. No, they are not judging us. And it's like the masters have said this several times, you know, we are not in duality. We don't judge you like the fallen beings do. So please don't project on us that we are like the fallen beings. So you feel embarrassed if you cannot give him love. Yeah, then you're not worthy. Well, in a sense, what I went into in the Summit Lighthouse and what many people did, we were trying to please the masters by doing so many degrees and doing all these outer things. You know, so we were trying to buy the master's love by doing all these outer things. And of course, you can't buy what's offered freely. Neglect, yeah. But it comes from past lives also. Yeah. That's why you had that childhood, because then it gives you a chance to look at it in this lifetime. You know, you chose those kind of circumstances to get yourself to look at this issue. You know, so it's harder for you to ignore it. If you'd had an ideal childhood, you might not have been able to see it. But now, because you have the pain of the childhood, it's harder to ignore it. So this is your chance to really unravel it and just get beyond it. What I think about when you say something like this is a black hole. Yeah, it is. You know, no matter how much you put into it, you can never fill it. And on a natural planet, we experience we can do enough, and it was enough, but on Earth, it's never going to be enough. Because in essence, when you're doing something, you're giving energy. But when you give energy to the fallen beings, or even human beings who don't want to take responsibility for themselves, it's never enough for them. And you can keep giving indefinitely, and you will never fill the hole. But see, again, why did you choose to be around people who have that kind of psychology? It's because you wanted to put yourself in such an extreme situation that you had to look at this and say, I'm not going to do this anymore, because it will never lead anywhere. Yeah, but because you think then if you run faster, you'll catch the carrot, you know, and it's just never going to happen on a planet like Earth. But I want to say here, you know, we're talking about filling a black hole in other people. What you're really trying to do is filling a black hole in yourself, because the separate self is also a black hole, and you can never fill it. So no matter how much you do for others, the separate self that you have is never going to be satisfied. It will never be enough for that separate self. You simply have to come to see the separate self, separate you from what I'm saying. I'm not going to play this game anymore. I'm not going to try and satisfy you. I'm just walking away from you, because I created you, and you're only sustained by the energy I'm giving you. So when I stop giving you energy, you're going to shrivel and die, you know, and I'm letting you die. That's the whole beauty of this teaching from a master. Again and again, I see this, because I see how all of my life I was the problem solver. And you can keep on a planet like Earth. I mean, how many thousands of embodiments into the future could you continue trying to solve problems on this hellhole of a planet? You know, there just comes a point where you have to decide, I'm not solving problems anymore. I'm resigning myself from the position of being the problem solver supremo, you know, who can do what nobody else has done. I even recently had a separate self I was working on. There was the Saint Germain vigil, you know, and I was asking Saint Germain to help me see. I wasn't even asking to help me see something. I was just asking him to help me see what I couldn't see, what I couldn't even ask about. And so what came to me was that I thought that I should be able to solve the problems on Earth, even though I knew nobody else had been able to. However many ascended masters had come to Earth and had tried to solve the problem, I should have been able to do it. And I just saw it was a self. And I just thought, oh my God, I don't want to be trapped in this. You know? And so it was like, it's like you can have these selves that are like layers, because the basic idea is there's a goal that should be fulfilled on Earth. But it's really an impossible goal. Like I said, you can never fill the black hole. But you have a self that's pushing you to do something because you think that'll fill the hole. When you realize it won't, there's another self that, well, if you push harder, if you do something else, if you do more, if you do what nobody else has done before, you will fill the black hole. And how long can you keep going with this, you know, indefinitely? So there comes a point where you just have to take a look at this and say, enough. It's time to go to dinner. Enough of solving problems.